Maria Santos had always been different from other girls in her neighborhood. Growing up in the rough streets of East Los Angeles, she learned early that being small and quiet meant being a target. Her father, a former boxer turned security guard, noticed his daughter coming home with torn clothes and bruised arms once too often. That's when he made a decision that would change her life forever. "Mija," he said one evening, sitting her down at their worn kitchen table. "Tomorrow, we start training." She was only 12 then, but Maria threw herself into martial arts with the intensity of someone fighting for survival. Her father enrolled her in a local dojo, where Master Chen, an elderly man with weathered hands and sharp eyes, taught traditional kung fu. What started as self-defense lessons quickly became something much deeper. Master Chen saw something special in Maria. While other students struggled with basic forms, she moved like water, flowing from one technique to another with natural grace. Her small frame, which had made her a target on the streets, became her greatest advantage in the dojo. She was fast, flexible, and had an almost supernatural ability to read her opponent's movements. "Size is not strength," Master Chen would tell her as she practiced against students twice her weight. "A river cuts through mountains not with force, but with persistence, and knowing exactly where to strike." By the time Maria turned 18, she had earned her black belt and was teaching younger students. But life in East LA remained harsh. Gang activity was increasing, and young women were particularly vulnerable. Maria's reputation as someone who could handle herself spread through the neighborhood, though she preferred to avoid confrontation whenever possible. She worked part-time at a local grocery store while attending community college, studying to become a social worker. Maria wanted to help kids like herself, children who needed to learn that there were ways to be strong that didn't involve joining gangs or carrying weapons. Her dream was to open a community center where she could teach self-defense and provide mentorship. One particular evening in late October changed everything. Maria was closing the grocery store where she worked. The owner, Mr. Rodriguez, trusted her with the responsibility because she was reliable and careful. The store sat on a corner that had seen better days, surrounded by empty lots and abandoned buildings that created too many dark corners and hidden spaces. As Maria locked up the register and prepared to leave, she noticed a group of men hanging around outside. This wasn't unusual. The corner often attracted people with nowhere else to go. But something felt different tonight. These men weren't locals. Their clothes were too clean, their posture too confident. They watched the store with the focused attention of predators sizing up prey. Maria had developed sharp instincts over the years. Growing up where she did, you learned to read danger in body language, in the way people positioned themselves, in the tension that filled the air before trouble started. These men radiated menace in a way that made her skin crawl. She tried calling Mr. Rodriguez, but his phone went straight to voicemail. The night shift security guard who usually walked the area was nowhere to be seen. Maria realized she was completely alone, with only her keys, her purse, and the pepper spray she always carried, a small canister that her father insisted she keep after a recent string of robberies in the area. The store's back exit led to an alley that connected to a busier street about 2 blocks away. Maria decided that would be her safest route home. She turned off the lights, set the alarm system, and quietly slipped out the back door, hoping to avoid the group entirely. But the alley was darker than usual. Someone had broken the streetlight that normally illuminated the narrow passage between buildings. As Maria's eyes adjusted to the darkness, she realized with growing dread that she wasn't alone. Footsteps echoed behind her, deliberate and unhurried. Someone had been waiting. Well, what do we have here?" The voice came from directly in front of her. A tall man stepped out from behind a dumpster, blocking her path to the street. He was joined by another man, then another, until Maria found herself surrounded by 5 figures in the narrow alley. Her heart pounded, but her training kicked in immediately. Master Chen's voice echoed in her mind. When surrounded, stay calm. Observe everything. Look for escape routes. Remember that panic is your enemy's greatest weapon. Maria quickly assessed the situation. The men formed a loose circle around her, but they weren't trained fighters. Their positioning was sloppy, leaving gaps she could potentially exploit. The man directly in front of her seemed to be their leader. He stood with the arrogant confidence of someone used to intimidating others through size and numbers alone. "Just give us your purse, little girl, and maybe your phone too," the leader said with a cruel smile. "Make this easy on yourself." Maria's hand moved instinctively to her pepper spray, but before she could react, one of the men behind her grabbed her wrist with surprising speed. The small canister clattered to the ground and rolled away into the darkness. "Oh no," another man laughed. "Looks like the little girl lost her toy." They thought removing her pepper spray had made her helpless. They thought 5 grown men against 1 small woman would be an easy victory. They thought her fear would paralyze her into compliance. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Maria Santos had spent 6 years learning not just how to fight, but how to think like a fighter. Master Chen had taught her that true martial arts wasn't about flashy kicks or dramatic poses. It was about efficiency, precision, and using an opponent's strength against them. More importantly, he had taught her that the most dangerous mistake any fighter could make was underestimating their opponent. As the men closed in around her, Maria felt something shift inside her mind. The fear transformed into focus. The chaos of the moment crystallized into clarity. Every lesson, every hour of practice, every technique Master Chen had drilled into her muscle memory, aligned into perfect readiness. These men had made a critical error. They had taken away what they thought was her only weapon, never realizing that Maria Santos herself was the weapon, and in exactly 83 seconds, they were about to discover just how deadly a well-trained mind and body could be. The alley fell silent except for the distant hum of traffic and the sound of 5 men breathing heavily with anticipation. Maria stood perfectly still in the center of their circle, her body relaxed but ready, her mind calculating angles and distances with mathematical precision. What happened next would be talked about in the neighborhood for years to come. The first man moved exactly as Maria expected he would. Big, overconfident, and used to relying on intimidation rather than skill, he lunged forward with his arms outstretched, trying to grab her by the shoulders. It was a clumsy, amateur move that telegraphed his intentions from a mile away. Maria had faced this exact scenario hundreds of times in training. Master Chen called it the bear hug approach, the most common way untrained fighters tried to control smaller opponents. She sidestepped with fluid grace, her body moving like smoke in the wind. As the man stumbled forward, thrown off balance by grasping nothing but air, Maria's elbow connected with his solar plexus with surgical precision. The strike landed exactly where she intended, targeting the network of nerves below his ribcage. The man's diaphragm spasmed instantly, leaving him gasping and doubled over. Before he could recover, Maria's knee came up to meet his descending face. The sound of cartilage breaking echoed through the alley as he crumpled to the ground, unconscious before he hit the pavement. Total time elapsed. 8 seconds. The remaining 4 men stared in shock. What they had just witnessed didn't match their understanding of how these situations were supposed to go. A moment ago, they had been predators cornering helpless prey. Now, their strongest member was lying motionless at their feet, and the small woman they had planned to rob was standing calmly in a fighting stance they didn't recognize. "What the hell?" one of them muttered, but Maria was already in motion. The second attacker approached more cautiously, pulling a knife from his jacket pocket. The blade caught what little light filtered into the alley, and he waved it threateningly as he advanced. "Stay back," he shouted, though his voice cracked with nervousness. "I'll cut you." Maria's eyes locked onto the weapon. her mind automatically shifting into the knife defense protocols Master Chen had drilled into her countless times. She knew that most people who pulled knives in street fights held them incorrectly, telegraphed their movements, and relied on fear rather than technique. This man proved her assessment correct. He thrust the blade forward in a wild, overextended motion that left his entire body vulnerable. Maria stepped inside his reach with lightning speed, her left hand clamping down on his wrist, while her right hand drove into his elbow joint with devastating force. The joint hyperextended with a sickening crack. His fingers opened involuntarily, and the knife clattered to the ground. Before he could scream, Maria's palm strike caught him under the chin, snapping his head back and sending him reeling into the alley wall where he slumped down, dazed and groaning. Time elapsed, 21 seconds. The third man tried to surprise her by attacking from behind while she dealt with the knife wielder. He wrapped his arms around her waist, lifting her off the ground and squeezing tight, trying to crush her ribs with brute force. This was another classic amateur mistake. Master Chen had taught Maria that being grabbed from behind was actually an advantageous position for someone who knew how to use it. She relaxed completely for a split second, making herself dead weight in his arms, then drove her heel down onto his instep with all her force while simultaneously throwing her head back into his nose. The double strike had the desired effect. His grip loosened instantly as pain shot through his foot and face. Maria slipped down and spun in his arms, her elbow whipping around to catch him in the ribs. The man stumbled backward, and Maria followed up with a quick combination, a straight punch to his sternum followed by a sweep that took his legs out from under him. He hit the ground hard, the wind knocked completely out of him. Maria stepped back, breathing steadily, her eyes already tracking the movements of the two remaining attackers. Time elapsed. 37 seconds. The fourth and fifth men exchanged uncertain glances. What had seemed like an easy robbery was turning into a nightmare. 3 of their friends were down, and this woman showed no signs of fear or fatigue. Worse, she moved with the controlled precision of someone who had been training for exactly this type of situation. They decided to rush her together, hoping that coordinated numbers would overwhelm her defenses. It was their final mistake. Maria had spent countless hours practicing against multiple opponents. Master Chen believed that real self-defense meant preparing for the worst-case scenarios, not just one-on-one sparring matches. She knew how to position herself so that her attackers would interfere with each other, how to use their momentum against them, and how to strike with maximum efficiency while conserving energy. As the 2 men charged forward, Maria moved diagonally, forcing them to bunch up as they tried to adjust their angles. The man on her left reached her first, throwing a wild haymaker that she ducked easily. His fist sailed over her head as she drove a sharp uppercut into his exposed ribs. The impact lifted him slightly off his feet, and Maria immediately grabbed his arm, using his own forward momentum to throw him into his approaching partner. The 2 men collided in a tangle of arms and legs, both falling to the ground in confusion. Maria didn't give them time to recover. She stepped forward and delivered a precise kick to the first man's temple, switching him off like a light. The final attacker tried to scramble to his feet, but Maria was already there, her hand chopping down onto a pressure point at the base of his neck. He collapsed instantly, joining his unconscious friends on the alley floor. Total time elapsed, 83 seconds. Maria stood in the center of the alley, surrounded by 5 motionless figures. Her breathing was slightly elevated but controlled, her stance still balanced and ready. She looked around carefully, making sure there were no additional threats, then slowly relaxed her guard. The silence that followed was profound. No shouting, no groaning, no sounds of movement from any of the attackers. The only noise came from the distant traffic and her own steady breathing. Maria had neutralized 5 grown men in less than a minute and a half, using nothing but the skills Master Chen had taught her. She retrieved her pepper spray from where it had rolled into the corner, then carefully stepped over the unconscious bodies to reach the mouth of the alley. Before leaving, she turned back to look at the scene one more time. 5 men had cornered her, thinking she was defenseless. They had taken away what they believed was her only means of protection. They had every advantage they thought they needed: numbers, size, aggression, and the element of surprise. But they hadn't counted on facing someone who had dedicated years of her life to learning how to turn disadvantages into advantages, how to use an opponent's strength against them, and how to remain calm and focused when violence erupted around her. Maria Santos walked out of that alley the same way she had entered it, alone and unharmed. But she left behind 5 men who would never again make the mistake of underestimating someone based on their size or appearance. As she made her way to the street, Maria felt a strange mix of emotions. There was relief that she had escaped unharmed, pride that her training had proved effective when it mattered most, but also sadness that violence had been necessary at all. Master Chen had always taught her that the greatest victory in martial arts was the fight you never had to fight. But when confrontation became unavoidable, he had also taught her to end it as quickly and decisively as possible. 83 seconds. That's how long it had taken for 5 would-be robbers to learn that weapons could be taken away, but skill, training, and determination could never be removed from someone who truly possessed them. The neighborhood would talk about this night for months to come, but Maria Santos would continue on with her life, carrying the quiet confidence of someone who knew exactly what they were capable of when push came to shove. Maria walked the 2 blocks to the main street in a daze, her mind still processing what had just happened. The familiar sounds of evening traffic and distant music from nearby apartments seemed surreal after the intense silence of the alley. She pulled out her cell phone with trembling hands and dialed 911, reporting the incident in a voice that sounded steadier than she felt. Within minutes, police cars and an ambulance arrived at the scene. Officer Rodriguez, a veteran cop who had worked the neighborhood for over a decade, found Maria sitting on a bench outside a 24-hour laundromat, still wearing her grocery store uniform and looking remarkably composed for someone who had just been involved in a violent altercation. "Ma'am, you called in an assault?" Officer Rodriguez asked, his pen poised over his notepad. He had responded to countless robbery calls in this area, but something about this one felt different. Usually, the victims were shaken, injured, or both. This young woman seemed calm and alert, with no visible signs of trauma. 5 men tried to rob me in the alley behind Martinez Grocery, Maria explained, providing the details in clear chronological order. They took my pepper spray, then attacked me. I defended myself. Officer Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. "You defended yourself against 5 men?" "Yes, sir." When the officer arrived at the alley with backup, he found a scene unlike anything in his 15 years of police work. 5 men were scattered across the pavement in various states of consciousness. 3 were completely unconscious. 1 was groaning and holding his broken nose, and the 5th was sitting against the wall, dazed and confused. The paramedics quickly determined that while all 5 men had sustained injuries, none were life-threatening. Broken nose, dislocated elbow, bruised ribs, possible concussions, the kind of damage that spoke to precise, controlled force rather than mindless violence. As the story spread through the police station, it attracted the attention of Detective Sarah Kim, who specialized in assault cases. She had seen plenty of self-defense situations, but the evidence in the alley told an extraordinary story. The positioning of the bodies, the nature of their injuries, and the complete lack of harm to the victim suggested a level of martial arts skill that was almost professional. "These weren't lucky shots," Detective Kim told her partner as they reviewed the incident report. "Someone with serious training did this. Look at these medical reports. Every injury targets specific points that would incapacitate quickly without causing permanent damage. This woman knew exactly what she was doing. Word of the incident spread through the neighborhood with the speed of wildfire. In a community where robberies and assaults were unfortunately common, the story of a young woman single-handedly defeating 5 attackers became instant legend. Details grew more dramatic with each telling, but the core facts remained consistent. Maria Santos had defended herself with nothing but her bare hands and emerged completely unharmed. At the local dojo where Maria trained, Master Chen received the news with a mixture of pride and concern. He had always known that Maria was his most gifted student, but he had hoped she would never need to use her skills in a real-life situation. "You did well, child," he told her when she visited the next evening. "But I can see in your eyes that this troubles you." Maria nodded, sitting cross-legged on the mat where she had spent countless hours learning the techniques that had saved her life. "I never wanted to hurt anyone, Master Chen, but they didn't give me a choice." The elderly instructor studied her carefully. "This is the burden of knowledge, Maria. When you possess the ability to defend yourself and others, you also carry the responsibility of using that power wisely. Tell me, do you regret learning what I taught you?" "No," Maria replied without hesitation. "But I wish I hadn't needed to use it." "That response tells me you learned the most important lesson of all," Master Chen smiled. "True martial arts is not about fighting. It is about having the confidence and ability to avoid fights, but being prepared when avoidance is impossible." The 5 attackers were arrested and charged with attempted robbery and assault. During questioning, they provided a clearer picture of what had transpired in the alley. Their leader, a man named Carlos Mendez, had a lengthy criminal record and was reportedly planning to expand his operations in the neighborhood. "I don't understand what happened," Mendez told detectives, his voice still shaky from the encounter. "One minute we had her cornered, the next minute all my guys were on the ground. She moved so fast I couldn't even follow it. It was like fighting a ghost." The local news picked up the story within a week. "Woman defeats 5 attackers in 83 seconds" became a headline that captured the public imagination. Maria, who had always preferred to stay out of the spotlight, found herself reluctantly thrust into it. Local television stations wanted interviews. Martial arts magazines requested articles. Self-defense instructors began using her story as an example of why their training worked. The grocery store where she worked became a minor tourist attraction, with people stopping by to see where that woman who fought off 5 guys used to work. But the attention also brought opportunities Maria hadn't expected. Community leaders reached out, wanting her to speak to young people about alternatives to gang membership. Women's organizations invited her to discuss self-defense and personal empowerment. Most significantly, a local businessman who had heard her story offered to fund the community center she had always dreamed of opening. "What you did in that alley wasn't just about protecting yourself," explained Mrs. Patricia Williams, president of the Neighborhood Association. "You showed everyone, especially the young women in this community, that they don't have to be victims, that they can learn to protect themselves and stand up to bullies and criminals." Maria decided to accept some of the speaking opportunities, but always with a specific message. She didn't want to glorify violence or suggest that martial arts was the only answer to the neighborhood's problems. Instead, she focused on the values Master Chen had taught her: discipline, respect, confidence, and the importance of avoiding confrontation whenever possible. "I didn't learn martial arts to hurt people," she told a group of high school students during one of her talks. "I learned it to protect myself and others, and to build the confidence that comes from knowing you can handle difficult situations. But the most important thing my teacher taught me was that the best fight is the one you never have to fight." The community center became a reality 8 months later. The Santos Self-Defense and Youth Center opened in a renovated warehouse just 6 blocks from the alley where everything had changed. Maria left her job at the grocery store to run the center full-time, offering martial arts classes, tutoring programs, and mentorship for at-risk youth. Master Chen became her co-instructor, and together they built a program that emphasized not just physical techniques, but character development and conflict resolution. The center's motto, painted in bold letters above the entrance, read, "Strength through wisdom, peace through preparation." The 5 men who had attacked Maria all received prison sentences ranging from 2 to 5 years. Interestingly, 3 of them requested to meet with her before their sentencing. They wanted to apologize and to understand how someone they had seen as an easy target had so completely turned the tables on them. "I'm not angry with you," Maria told them during a supervised meeting at the county jail. "I hope you use your time in prison to think about the choices that led you to that alley and to consider different choices when you get out." One of the men, the youngest of the group, took her words to heart. Upon his release, he enrolled in the community center's programs and eventually became one of Maria's assistant instructors, helping other young men find alternatives to the path that had led him to crime. The incident in the alley became a turning point, not just for Maria, but for the entire neighborhood. Crime rates in the area began to drop as word spread that there were people in the community who wouldn't be easy victims. More importantly, young people began to see that there were other sources of strength and respect besides gangs and weapons. Maria continued her college studies, eventually earning her degree in social work. But she never left the community center, which grew to serve over 200 young people each year. She married a fellow martial artist she met at a regional tournament, and they raised their 2 children in the same neighborhood where she had grown up. Years later, when people asked Maria about the night that changed everything, she would always emphasize the same point. The real victory wasn't defeating 5 attackers in 83 seconds. The real victory was building something positive from that experience, something that helped prevent other young people from becoming either victims or perpetrators of violence. "They thought taking away my pepper spray made me defenseless," Maria would say. But they couldn't take away years of training, discipline, and preparation. Most importantly, they couldn't take away the confidence that comes from knowing you've put in the work to be ready for whatever life throws at you. The alley where it all happened was eventually cleaned up and turned into a small community garden, tended by volunteers from the center. A small plaque near the entrance reads, "In every ending there is a new beginning." Maria Santos had proven that sometimes when you're backed into a corner with nowhere to run, the only way out is through. And sometimes going through leads to something better than you ever imagined possible.